Okay, so in the previous video you saw me use Distress Paints by Tim Holtz. And the reason I did that is because they're really easy to clean up. But you will notice that with Distress Paints you don't get quite as vivid an image as you will with acrylic paints. So on this section I'm going to show you how to use acrylic paints. I'm going to use some of the same techniques as I did with the with the Distress Paint, so you can see the difference. But I'm also going to do a couple of other things that are a little different. So first thing we're going to do is just apply some color onto our jelly plate. And here's my jelly plate. And again, I have it on my acrylic board, which is an option. This is not something you have to have. I just find it's really easy to use. It's great too if you want to stamp an image. And we'll talk about that maybe a little later. And I've got my brayers, and one for smoothing out the paint, and then like I said, I like to use the dry one to smooth over the paper to make my print, but you can use your hands, it works just as well. And I've got some basic colors here, and I'm just using 3 colors right at the moment: blue, yellow, and red. These are not expensive paints. They're acrylic by Liquitex. Bought a box of 48 colors for I think $40, something like that, some time ago, and they often come on sale. So with having said that, I'm just going to put a little color on my plate. Now you'd only need a drop, and that's probably more than enough. And so this before smoothing it out, I find if you lift the brayer up as you smooth it out, it gives you a more even layer, and also it is easier to control the amount of paint that goes on. As I said before, you don't need a whole lot. Place it in thin. And off to the side here I have a piece of just scrap cardstock that I'm rolling off the paint to clean it from my brayer, which later on could be a background paper in itself. So there I go. I just have my thin layer of blue paint on here. And I'm just going to leave it like that for a moment, and I'm going to grab what we call catalyst tools. And I have to find my catalyst tools. And I don't know where my catalyst tools are. Well, that's really good. So just hold on a second. I'm just going to pause the video. Okay, I found my catalyst tools, and while I was looking for those, which were right under my nose, my paint dried on the acrylic pad. So you'll notice that the blue I've used this time, I had to wipe the other one off. I tried to reactivate it with water. That didn't seem to work. So I used a baby wipe and cleaned that all off, and I've added another color of blue. And in fact, I've added a little deeper color of blue this time, because I think I like it better. So what are catalyst tools? These are catalyst tools. They're tools that have ridges on them, and the name of the company that makes them is, I think, well, they call them Catalyst. Okay, but you see they've got all these different little designs on them, which you can use for your jelly plate printing. So I'm just going to use this one, and I'm just making a swirl, and it's always good to have some baby wipes nearby, so you can just take the excess off your pad. Jelly plate printing is a messy process, so be prepared for that. And maybe I'll use this one and see what I get here. Try maybe a little squiggle there, a little squiggle there. Okay, clean that off. You can use anything to create a design in the jelly plate. It doesn't have to be a catalyst tool. You can use a pencil, the tip of a paintbrush, the end of a spatula, whatever you've got laying around. It doesn't matter. Feel free to experiment. You can even take little cups, like little shot glasses, and make circles all over it, and that works very well too. So here's my paper for printing. I'm laying that down, and I'm using my dry brayer just to smooth it off. And as I said, you could use your hands, that's not a problem. And let's see what we've got. The big reveal. Now you can see right there that the colors are much more vivid when you're using acrylic paints as opposed to the distress paints. Totally different look. So if you want something with a little bit more brightness to it, I would recommend you go with the acrylic paints. Let's put that aside to dry. And let's pull a ghost. And remember, a ghost is just a second print. Takes up whatever's left. And see what we get from this. It's also a good way to clean your jelly plate. And we didn't get very much at all on that. So that's fine. I'm going to leave the residue that's on here. I'm not going to clean it off. what I'm going to do is take another color. I'm going to take this lighter shade of blue. I'm just going to spread it right on top. Same method. Just smooth out your paint. Get it even and get it thin. You don't want that much. And now for some variety, why don't I take a stencil to this one? Let's try, I've got several stencils off to the side here. Let's try this one with the hexagons in it. I'm just going to lay it right down the center. I'm going to take a piece of paper again. And in fact, I'm using that piece of paper. I got a little bit of the stuff on it from the ghost that didn't really work. And that's okay, because this will probably just cover it up. Brayer it. You want to work that stencil in. Now this is where your fingers might be an asset, because you can push into the spaces in the stencil with them, maybe a little better than you can with a brayer. So I'm just going to press that down well. And now let's see what we got this time. Well, that's kind of interesting. It picked up the swirls in behind, you see, and because this stencil has some very solid parts in it, that's why we have the solid white. So we're just going to put that aside for now. And I'm going to put my stencils aside. And what you might want to do with your stencils, if you're really particular about cleaning them, is have a bucket of water nearby, a little dishpan of water. You can drop them in and let them soak until you're done, then wash them all. I have a tendency not to wash my stencils very thoroughly, so I'm just going to take it and put it off to the side. I'll look after it later. Okay, so I've got some more pattern on here. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to build with another color. I'm going to leave what's on here right now, and let's try some yellow. And I'm just going to leave it like that before I try putting anything else into it, see what it lifts. Ooh, that's kind of neat. You see that? So it picked up some of that stencil from before. It even picked up some of the swirls, and we got some sort of a modeling effect going on here too. We can build on that layer as well. I think though for the next thing I'm going to do, I am going to clean off the Gelli plate. I'm just using a baby wipe. Make sure you use a non-alcohol baby wipe, otherwise you will dry out your Gelli plate, and that is not a good thing. And you don't have to be real particular about how well you clean it up. And for this next one, I think what I'll do is, I think I'll lay down some red. And this time, as I said before, what I'm doing off screen here is I'm just cleaning off my brayer just on a piece of scrap paper, rolling it back and forth. I'm going to use some texture stamps. This one's a little circle in a circle kind of a thing, and I'm just going to press it in randomly. And oops, came off my thing. Oh, that's okay. Okay, so I've got those in. Now it is acrylic paint, so I do want to clean it off my stamps afterwards. Again, I'm not that particular about cleaning off my stamps, but things like acrylic paint that when they dry are more permanent, you don't want those sitting on your stamps because it could wreck your stamps. And I'm just using a baby wipe. Okay, and then I think I'll lay down another stencil on top of this. Here's something a little fancy. Let's see what happens when I put that down. And I'm going to use this sheet again, the one that had the hexagons and everything happening in it. Let's see what we get. Again, I think I'm going to use my fingers on this because there's a lot of little intricate cutouts in this stencil. So my fingers help me to get the paint up through those and onto my paper. And let's see what we get. Ooh, this is starting to become really quite attractive. Okay, now let's see what we get for the ghost off this one. Now remember, your ghost print is always going to be lighter than your first print because it's just getting up the residue of paint. Very nice. Very nice indeed. Okay, I'm going to pause the video, and when I come back, I'm going to show you some other more advanced techniques.